Welcome to the Facilitators Deep Dive Podcast, your podcast on your way to facilitation mastery.
Ever feel like your projects are just sprawling out of control with information just scattered everywhere? It's like you're trying to juggle a dozen different priorities, but while blindfolded. Today's deep dive might just be the antidote to that chaos. We are exploring a method called 3D-Worlds.
Okay.
And from what I'm seeing in these sources, it's like a mind map on steroids, but in 3D.
Wow, that's a great way to put it.
Yeah.
It is all about taking those abstract project plans, goals, and connections and bringing them into the real world, where you can literally see the big picture and how all the pieces fit together.
Yeah, it's fascinating. We've got a website and a YouTube video about this method created by a guy named Janik Panitz.
Oh.
He calls it the 3D Welton method, which is just 3D worlds in German.
Interesting.
Yeah.
And what's so intriguing about it is that instead of getting bogged down in spreadsheets or endless digital documents, you're building a physical landscape with different levels and clusters of objects.
Okay.
Imagine a tabletop model, almost like a game board, where each piece represents a different aspect of your project.
So instead of just listing out tasks, you're creating like a tangible map of the entire project ecosystem.
Exactly.
I'm already starting to see how this could be so helpful, especially for visual thinkers like me. But let's break it down. How does this 3D world actually get built?
Well, according to the website, it starts with these hexagon-shaped cards.
Okay.
Where you write down all the key topics of your project.
Gotcha.
Think big picture stuff.
Yeah.
Goals, milestones, major tasks. Then you start clustering related topics together into what they call islands.
Okay.
The closer the islands, the stronger the connection between those topics.
Okay, I'm picturing a map starting to take shape.
Yeah.
But where does the 3D part come in?
That's where things get really interesting.
Okay.
The height of each island represents its priority.
Oh.
Higher islands mean more important topics. So you could have your mission-critical goals literally towering over everything else, giving you an instant visual cue of what needs the most attention.
Ah, I see.
Yeah.
So you're not just mapping out connections, you're also building in like a hierarchy of importance.
Right.
That's so smart.
Yeah.
What about other elements of the project?
Yeah.
How do those get represented?
The source material says you can use different colored markers to represent different things.
Okay.
Like you could have blue markers for stakeholders, red for potential risks,
Gotcha.
green for resources.
Right.
You could even use string or arrows to show the flow of information or dependencies between different parts of the project.
Wow. So you're essentially building a living, breathing model of your project.
Yeah.
And the best part is it's not static. As the project evolves, you can adapt the 3D world.
Right.
Move things around, add new elements. It's almost like a dynamic problem-solving tool.
Exactly. And that's one of the key advantages highlighted in the sources. Unlike traditional project plans that can quickly become outdated, the 3D world is designed to evolve and grow alongside your project.
You know, I've always struggled with those static project plans.
Yeah.
They feel so rigid and limiting. This 3D world approach seems much more intuitive and adaptable, especially in today's fast-paced world where things are constantly changing.
Absolutely.
That's where this method really shines.
Yeah.
Think about the kind of projects you're involved in. Are they complex? Do they involve a lot of moving parts and shifting priorities?
Yeah.
If so, this approach might be just what you need to get a handle on the chaos.
It could be.
And speaking of getting a handle on things, the source material mentions something called VUCA environments.
Right.
They say 3D worlds are particularly effective in these contexts. What exactly does VUCA stand for?
VUCA stands for volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous.
Okay.
It's basically a fancy acronym for those situations where things are constantly in flux.
Right.
Where traditional planning methods fall apart. Because you can't predict what's going to happen next.
So basically the kind of world we live in now.
Yeah, pretty much.
Everything is moving so fast it's hard to keep up, let alone plan effectively.
Right.
So you're saying 3D worlds can help us navigate these turbulent waters?
That's the idea.
Okay.
By creating a visual representation of the project and its interconnected elements, you're essentially building a framework for understanding complexity and adapting to change.
Right.
Instead of getting overwhelmed by the uncertainty, you're empowered to make more informed decisions.
This is making a lot of sense to me, but I have to admit I'm also a bit skeptical.
Oh.
Can a physical model really be that much more effective than, say, a detailed project management software?
That's a great question, and it's one the sources address directly.
Okay.
They argue that the very act of physically building and interacting with the 3D world engages different parts of your brain, fostering a deeper level of understanding and retention.
Okay.
It's not just about seeing the information.
Right.
It's about feeling it, manipulating it, making those connections in a more tangible way.
So it's almost like a kinesthetic learning experience. Instead of it just passively absorbing information, you're actively creating something.
Right.
Which in turn helps you internalize the concepts more deeply.
Yeah, and that's something a digital tool, no matter how sophisticated, can't fully replicate.
Okay.
There's something about that hands-on tactile experience that sparks creativity and fosters a more collaborative environment.
This is really starting to pique my curiosity.
Right.
I'm eager to learn more about the specific benefits of using 3D worlds and how they can be applied in different contexts.
Yeah.
But I think we've covered a lot of ground in this first part.
We have.
What do you think? Should we take a pause here and let our listener digest all this awesomeness before we dive deeper?
That sounds like a great plan.
Okay.
Let's give our listeners some time to envision their own 3D world.
Okay.
Maybe even start sketching out some ideas. We'll be back soon to explore the practical applications of this fascinating method.
Great. Looking forward to it.
Me too.
Welcome back. I hope you had a chance to picture how a 3D world might bring some order to your own projects.
Yeah.
It's already got my gears turning.
I know, right?
So we've talked about the what of 3D worlds, but now I'm curious about the how.
Okay.
Where do you even begin building one of these things?
Well, you might be surprised to learn that the process itself can be incredibly insightful.
Okay.
It's not just about assembling a model.
Right.
It's about having those critical discussions about priorities, dependencies, and potential risks as you build.
So it's not just a visualization tool, it's like a collaborative process in itself.
Exactly.
Okay.
The website lays out some clear steps, starting with identifying those key topics like we discussed earlier. But as you start clustering those topics into islands and assigning heights based on priority, you're forced to make decisions about what's truly important. And that act of prioritizing can be incredibly revealing, especially when done as a team.
Can you give me an example of how that might play out in a real-world scenario?
Imagine you're working on a product launch.
Okay.
You might have separate islands for marketing development and logistics. Right. But as you start placing those islands and adjusting their heights, you might realize that a dependency you hadn't considered before is actually a critical path item.
Okay.
Maybe the marketing team can't finalize their campaign until a specific feature is developed.
Gotcha.
Seeing that connection literally laid out in front of you can be a real eye-opener.
So it's not just about creating a pretty picture, it's about uncovering those hidden connections and dependencies that can make or break a project.
Precisely. And then as you start adding those colored markers for stakeholders, risks, resources, and so on, you get an even richer understanding of the project ecosystem. You can see where potential bottlenecks might arise.
Where resources are being stretched thin, and where risks need to be mitigated.
It's like having X-ray vision for your project.
Yeah. Seeing
all the inner workings and potential points of failure.
That's a great analogy.
Yeah.
And remember, this 3D world isn't a static artifact. It's designed to evolve as your project progresses. As new information emerges, priorities shift, or risks materialize.
Gotcha.
You can adapt the model accordingly, keeping it relevant and useful throughout the entire project lifecycle.
You know, in the first part, I was a bit skeptical about the practicality of a physical model in our digital world.
I can understand that.
But I have to admit, the more we discuss this, the more I'm seeing the value.
You're not alone.
Yeah.
A lot of people initially have that reaction, but when they actually experience the power of this hands-on visual approach, they quickly become converts.
Yeah.
There's something about that tactile interaction.
That sparks creativity and fosters a level of collaboration that's hard to replicate digitally.
I'm wondering, though, how practical is this for remote teams? It seems like it would be difficult to build a shared physical model when everyone is scattered across different locations.
That's a valid point.
Yeah.
And it's definitely one of the limitations the source material acknowledges. They're currently working on a digital version of the 3D-Worlds method, which could address this challenge.
Oh.
But even with the physical model, there are ways to adapt for remote collaboration.
Right.
You could, for instance, use video conferencing to share the model and allow team members to virtually walk through it and contribute their ideas.
So even if you can't all be physically present,
Right.
you can still leverage the power of the visual representation to facilitate discussion and decision-making.
Absolutely. And let's not forget that building the initial 3D world is just the first step.
Right.
The real value comes from the ongoing interaction with the model, the discussions it sparks, and the insights it reveals as you work through the project.
Right.
And that can happen whether you're all gathered around a table or connected through a screen.
I'm starting to see how this could be a game changer, especially for those complex, multifaceted projects that can easily spiral out of control. But what about simpler projects? Is there still value in using 3D worlds for something small scale?
Right. That's an interesting question.
Yeah.
One of the things I found compelling in the YouTube video was their emphasis on choosing the right level of detail for your 3D world.
Okay.
They caution against getting too granular.
Right.
Especially for smaller projects.
So it's about finding that sweet spot between oversimplifying and getting bogged down in the weeds?
Yes, it's about capturing the essence of the project without losing sight of the forest for the trees. And that's a skill that's valuable regardless of the project's size or complexity.
You know, we keep talking about these hypothetical scenarios, but I'm curious to hear about how 3D worlds are actually being used in real-world projects.
Yeah.
Do the sources mention any specific examples?
They do.
Oh.
They highlight several applications.
Right.
Ranging from strategic planning and resource allocation to risk management and agile development.
Okay, let's dive into some of those. I'm particularly intrigued by the idea of using 3D worlds for resource allocation. How does that actually work?
Well, imagine you've built your 3D world, and you've got all your key topics represented as islands, along with markers for the resources you have available, people, budget, time, materials. As you start discussing tasks and assigning responsibilities, you can literally move those resource markers around the model, seeing where you might have shortages, where you need to prioritize, and where you might be able to reallocate resources to maximize efficiency.
So it's like a dynamic resource management tool that gives you a real-time view of your capacity and how you're allocating your efforts.
Precisely. And this visual approach can be incredibly helpful in identifying potential bottlenecks.
Right.
And making those tough decisions about where to focus your energy.
This is fascinating stuff, and I'm eager to explore more of these real-world applications, but I think we're approaching the end of part 2.
Okay.
What do you say we take another pause here and let our listener ponder some of these ideas?
That sounds good to me.
Right.
In the next part, we'll delve deeper into those specific applications, and we'll also tackle some of the limitations of the 3D Worlds method head on.
Great. So until then, dear listener, think about what aspects of your own projects might benefit from this visual approach. What challenges are you facing that a 3D world could help you overcome?
Yeah, good questions.
We'll be back soon to continue our exploration. All right, we're back for the final part of our deep dive into 3D worlds.
As we are.
You know, as we've been discussing this method, I've realized that what initially seemed like limitations might actually be its secret weapons.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
Remember how we talked about the importance of choosing the right level of detail?
Yeah.
The fact that 3D worlds aren't suited for highly granular projects forces you to focus on what truly matters.
That's true.
It's like a built-in prioritization tool.
Yeah.
Instead of getting lost in the minutia, you're compelled to make tough decisions about what deserves a place in your 3D landscape.
Right. And that kind of strategic thinking can be incredibly valuable, especially when you're dealing with complex projects where it's easy to get sidetracked by less important details.
And what about the fact that it's primarily a physical method in a world that's increasingly digital? Some might see that as a drawback.
I see.
But I'm starting to think it's actually a strength.
Right. Well, the sources definitely emphasize the power of that hands-on tactile experience.
Okay.
They argue that the act of physically building and manipulating the model engages different parts of your brain, leading to a deeper level of understanding and retention.
It's like the difference between reading about something and actually experiencing it firsthand.
Exactly.
You're not just passively absorbing information. You're actively creating something, which makes the learning process much more engaging and impactful.
And let's not forget the collaborative aspect. Gathering around a table, literally building this shared vision together, fosters a sense of teamwork and camaraderie that's hard to replicate in a purely digital environment.
It's like a shared ritual, a way of creating a tangible representation of your collective goals and aspirations.
That's a great way to put it.
And that sense of shared purpose can be incredibly motivating, especially when you're facing challenges or setbacks along the way.
Absolutely.
The 3D world serves as a constant visual reminder of that shared vision, that collective aspiration that drives the project forward.
Yeah.
You know, one of the things that really struck me in the YouTube video was the idea that 3D worlds can help people reconnect with the why of their work.
Oh, yeah.
They said, the 3D worlds method leads all employees back to themselves and to the company, back to the enthusiasm for the shared idea.
Okay.
What do you think they meant by that?
I think it speaks to the power of this method to rekindle that sense of passion and purpose that can sometimes get lost in the day-to-day grind.
Yeah.
By visualizing the big picture, seeing how their individual contributions fit into the larger whole, people are reminded of why they're doing this work in the first place.
It's like they're saying, hey, remember that spark that ignited this project? Remember the excitement we all felt when we first embarked on this journey?
Exactly. Yeah. And that reminder can be incredibly powerful, especially when things get tough or the team starts to lose momentum. The 3D world serves as a constant visual reminder of that shared vision, that collective aspiration that drives the project forward.
So it's not just about managing tasks and resources. It's about reigniting that sense of purpose and inspiration that fuels great work.
Absolutely, and that's something that can benefit any project, regardless of its size or complexity.
Well, I think we've covered just about everything there is to know about 3D worlds.
Yeah, I think so.
We've explored the what, the why, the how, and even the what ifs.
Yeah.
But before we wrap up,
okay,
I want to leave you, dear listener, with a final thought.
Okay, I'm listening. Imagine
yourself standing in the middle of your own 3D world.
Okay.
You're surrounded by the towering islands representing your project's key goals, the interconnected pathways symbolizing the flow of information and resources, the vibrant markers signifying the people and the passion driving it all forward.
Yes.
What do you see?
Okay.
What do you feel? And most importantly, what actions will you take to bring that vision to life?
It's time to go forth and build your own world. See you next time on the Facilitators Deep Dive Podcast, your podcast on your way to facilitation mastery. Until next time.
See you then.